Nicole Auerbach, NBC Sports, who was embedded in Lincoln, Nebraska, Colorado, and also so many other things to discuss when it comes to college football, including the change at AD at Pittsburgh. Nicole, if you don't mind, let's start with that. Heather Lyke was someone that a lot of people had great respect for, had been there not quite a decade, but most of the reaction I've seen has been a surprise on that one.
Yeah, very, very shocking. I think, she's been among the leaders in college football. She's been, involved in the football oversight committee. She's been on a lot of groups that have helped shape where college football is today. She's been at Pitt for a long time. She extended Pat Narduzzi. She gave Jeff Capel a chance to turn things around, which he then did for the men's basketball team. I've always heard great things from the other coaches at Pitt about her. So that was definitely a surprise. But, when new presidents come into these schools, a lot of times they like to make their mark as they're figuring out their landscape, their allies on the campus. And I think it just becomes very challenging, especially, for athletic directors who maybe have been there for a while. And, again, you have an AD or a president who come in. I think right now across the country, there's just a lot of tension between the presidents and ADs, especially, with the House settlement and all this stuff about the future of college football, where the money is coming from, where it goes. I just think that's created a lot of tension on a lot of different campuses. And, it spills over. But again, I think just a lot of shock, considering just how well respected she was. And the teams across the board being in a good place at Pitt.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned there about her being on the committees that are steering the future of college sports would make me think that she's maybe someone you'd want to have at the helm. So yeah, that's why it's more confusing, because now you have to find somebody else who's kind of got that acumen. And I think she was
just named the AD of the year last year.
Those kind of athletic directors are in short supply, because it's kind of, you have to think differently. And right now there's still people kind of stuck in the mud of the old ways.
Right. I can't imagine that she'll be out of work long for all those reasons. And she's been a candidate for some of the top jobs that have been available in recent months. So yeah, definitely a shocker. But that is someone who is, extremely talented. And, on a personal level, I'm frustrated because there's not that many women who are, ADs of FBS athletic director departments. And so it's always frustrating to see, again, a surprise change there, or, you wonder about the dynamics at play, someone not having enough support. That's always just very frustrating, because it's very hard for women to get these jobs. And, when the leash is shorter than it really should be, it's just frustrating, because you just know that it's hard to get those jobs in the first place.
Nicole, in terms of the action that we saw on the field this weekend, what did you think of just the show in Lincoln, the big win over Colorado, and what that means for Matt Rhule and the Cornhuskers?
Yeah, I think it was a huge win for Nebraska. And listen, Colorado's not going to win a ton of games this year, but this was a team that beat them last year. They're both first-year coaches. There was, a lot of hoopla around that game. And I just think that Nebraska was frustrated by it. I think they believed that they were a better team. But last year's team also turned the ball over so much, right? They were minus 17 on the season. And, even though we saw the progress on the defensive side of the ball, I think you were still waiting for it to all come together. And now it looks like they have that, right? Obviously, you have a 5-star true freshman quarterback who wants to be the guy that leads Nebraska back to relevance. But also you just have an offense that is not turning the ball over. You have a quarterback who can protect it and still be confident. But the running backs aren't. They're playing a lot cleaner. So then you can really see that they are able to control a game the way that they did, even though I know Matt Rhule said, they were a little bit too conservative in the second half. They didn't need to do more. But, then you can let that defensive front control the game on the other side of the ball. You can just be the physical team that they want to be, and win games that are really sound and really much the way that the great Nebraska teams are, where it's just, the identity of the black shirts and things like that. So I think it was cathartic, but I think it was really important for them to show the nation that they are not the same team that lost to Colorado a year ago, and that they can put these pieces together, that they are building and rebuilding in a very sustainable way. And that's how Matt Rhule's done it in multiple places, as you guys know.
Nicole, you were there, and you know the struggle for the decade now. That's one of the couple of moments in that game that Nebraska fans haven't seen, along with a win, even though you're right, Colorado may not be in the end a great win, but any win when you haven't been winning is a good one. What do you see inside those doors that has been developed as far as you hear about that word culture and what is being preached by Matt Rhule inside Lincoln at Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean, I think the culture is really strong. This is, someone who I think has built really great relationships with college players in a number of different circumstances and different places and different college towns, parts of the country, because he's just really good at connecting with people. He brought a number of people on the staff that have been with him at those previous stops and understand how they do it. And a huge part is that defensive identity, which I think he's been really clear about. But they start these team meetings. Everyone's got to like dap up their, the people sitting near them, give them a hug, like check in on everyone around you. And then just the individual meetings, it's just a good culture. Like we were in a D-line meeting and like, it's just, it's very engaging. The players are really a big part of it. And, you can tell that the coaching staff feels like they've got a good team. They tell them that, and they want to hold them to high standards. So like they're pointing out mistakes that they're seeing because they know they're fixable. And so they're, it's not like they're yelling at these players, apologies, but they're holding them to a high standard because they know that they can fix it. And I think they just have a really good balance of that, of pushing them. But clearly, like, again, the hug, the love, all that stuff, the support is always a part of, kind of every meeting and every part of that feeling. And so it's a good combination because I think you see the schedules for Nebraska, you see that it's very possible, very likely even, that they'll be bowl eligible in October. So you won't have that hanging over this team of like, oh, can they get there? Can they get there? Can they snap this streak longer than anyone else in FBS? You just don't have, or in the Power Five, if you don't have that stress, I don't think you're going to see that with this team. And they're just getting more and more confident. Like they were very clear, publicly to not like say too much about Dylan Raiola. Like they didn't want to put too much pressure on him. Like he's already going to have that as a true freshman starting at Nebraska and with his family history there. But they've been incredibly supportive of him behind the scenes. They see him study, they work with him. They see how seriously he's taking everything. So like they're doing all the things to support a guy like that behind the scenes with veteran players and pieces around him, allow him to build his relationship with the O-line and the run and the receivers and all the things that he wants to do. They just have a really good feel for all of that, I think, where it's not overly, involved, but they're not hands off. Like I think they have a really good balance of all of that right now. And it just like felt very positive. And again, like I think the coaches, they're like, you guys are good. You guys are capable of doing all the things that we want to do. And they don't shy away from that. And I think that they're not going to be worried about like, everyone's going to be so positive coming out of the Colorado game. Like I would imagine that the culture inside the room is exactly the same today as it was a week ago.
Nicole, elsewhere in the Big Ten, Oregon has played 2 close games right off the top. Has your opinion changed about the Ducks?
I was very high on them coming into the season, and I still think they're going to be a good team. I'm definitely more concerned about the offensive line and like Dylan Gabriel and how that's working, which is always a concern when you bring in a transfer quarterback. And there's turnover on the team. They lost a lot of guys to the NFL draft at key positions, but I do believe that will get better. Apologies.
That's okay.
But it's concerning that, they've already given up more sacks in 2 games than they did all of last year. But again, that's on the quarterback too, like recognizing what is he seeing, where do his eyes need to be, as well as the offensive line. So that needs to improve. And I think they need to improve pretty quickly because they've got Ohio State in a month, but I'm not ready to write them off just yet. I think that what they have is still fixable. They just need to spend a little bit more time working together and also getting the better starts in these games, because that's been definitely a concern. You can tell Dan Lanning is very frustrated because he knows that they're more talented than they're playing right now.
Nicole, we had a mega showdown, 2 of the bluiest blue bloods in Michigan and Texas in Ann Arbor on Saturday. Texas handled that like it wasn't that even of a matchup, quite honestly. What were your thoughts coming out of it? Was it more about Texas or more about where Michigan sits for you?
I think overall it's more about Texas, because I think, coming out of that and especially seeing just how well they were playing just like every grouping, right? Like on the offensive line, the defensive line, at quarterback, skill position, like it was just it was just such a sound performance across the board. So you come out of that being like, all right, like them getting the CFP last year, not a fluke. Doesn't matter who they lost. Like they're building off of that. They're not going anywhere. I think it's fair to consider that they should be in that category with Georgia and Ohio State. I would take Oregon out of that top tier right now. I think they have to play their way in. So I think those are the three teams that have looked the part of national title contenders so far, and Texas is absolutely in that group. On the other hand, like Michigan, I think we all thought there would be a huge drop-off. You lose 13 NFL draft picks, and then you have a coaching change, and like basically the entire defensive staff goes with Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers. But still, I mean, this is clearly like even more of a drop-off than anticipated. You know, the offensive line, the quarterback play, it's been subpar. And because they couldn't really sustain drives and score points, you know, that game felt very much out of reach very quickly for Michigan. It felt very much like one of these teams is on a completely different level than the other. So that's where I think, you know, there's concerns with Michigan about the personnel. And then even, you know, you've got some great defensive players there, but do you have enough around them? And then do you have any depth? Otherwise, that defense might be on the field quite a bit against the good teams on this schedule. So I think, you know, you're recalibrating your expectations for Michigan. You know, I think they were right on the cusp of like, can they be a playoff team? I think with the schedule, with the way that we've seen them so far, you've got to have them on the outside looking in as of now. But again, I think the main takeaway coming out of that game was Texas is in that top tier of teams that are true title contenders.
Nicole, last thing, and we appreciate it and appreciate your time, is what Thomas Hammock is going to join us in the next segment. And what a phenomenal story and publicity exposure for Northern Illinois. He's an alum, what it's meant, and your thoughts about that win for that program, which had like 13-some million impressions over the weekend, and then also what it means for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame.
Yeah, huge win for Northern Illinois. And I thought that the post-game interview with Thomas Hammock and what we learned about him and his program, I thought was awesome. I mean, the nation certainly fell in love with him and the team quite a bit. And also people love seeing underdogs pull off wins like that, especially against blue blood like Notre Dame. But the concern for the Irish is just that they're not making the games boring that are supposed to be boring. Brian Kelly did. You know, where these games weren't close and they just handled business. He struggled in some of the big games, right? Marcus Freeman's won some of the big games, but these are the types of games that they need to handle. And like there was such a letdown coming off of the win against A&M. Plus, then, you know, you just really haven't seen Riley Leonard do much since he's gotten there. It was a big, highly touted get out of the portal. And yet they're in the small group of teams that hasn't thrown a touchdown pass so far this season. So, like, I think that he can be better, but I think that's got to be a deep concern, especially with, you know, the inexperience of the offensive line for Notre Dame.
Nicole, you guys are embarking on a new show there at NBC with the Big Ten and all of that. I watched it this week. You guys look like you were having fun. How's the chemistry in the crew? And we've had Joshua Perry on the show, I mean, I don't know, 10 times maybe. He's one of the best. We like having him on, and Chris Sims is always entertaining. What's the dynamic like?
Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Yesterday, you know, Saturday was a long day because we had 4 games across Peacock and NBC. But it was awesome, and I think it's a really good mix. Like, you know, we have figured out, you know, a way to cover the top national stories and also the Big Ten. And, you know, our schedule's awesome. Like, it was great to have Nebraska, Colorado and get to blow out that game, which deserved it. I mean, it was massive storylines and stakes for both teams coming into that one. So it's been awesome. It's been a blast. And I'm excited to get to hang out with those guys, you know, for the duration of the season. But it's really cool to work with Maria. You know, we all saw her on Gameday and know how much she loves college football. So I think she's particularly pumped to have college football and NFL duties on the weekend.
Hey, Nicole, glad you're where you are. Fantastic opportunity for you. Always appreciate your work. Thanks for your time, and have a great week.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Nicole Auerbach, NBC Sports, with us for 365 Sports.